Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and in our recent episodes, we've talked a lot about Imperial Defectors. The Rebel Alliance Starfighter Corps greatly benefited from Imperial pilots joining their ranks and sharing their experience with greener pilots. We also did a video about what defecating during different periods of time in the Galactic Empire's reign was like. Not every Imperial Defector was made the same way. Some would risk everything to join the rebellion, and some would be risking everything if they didn't leave the Empire. Anyway, in today's video, I want to take a closer look at what I believe are the 10 most important Imperial Defectors to join the rebellion. Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, Ownasaber.com. They are the only lightsaber retailer that guarantees that their products are free from possession by Sith spirits. Because, again, these were not looted from the battlefields of the Clone Wars, and we did not just follow, the clones into the Jedi Temple after Order 66. Although, that type of behavior and hustle is what kind of exemplified the hardworking folks at Coruscant. Anyway, today I want to introduce to you guys a very unique looking cross-hilt saber called the Dark Angel. And no, it's not Kylo Ren's lightsaber, although I've heard he actually likes calling himself Dark Angel while he's moping around in his room on Starkiller Base. But it makes sense that Kylo Ren would like hilt sabers. They were actually really popular in Star Wars during the Old Republic period amongst both Sith Lords and Jedi. Judging by the extravagant gold rings that surround the emitter and the gold on the pommel, this is probably a High Republic period Jedi lightsaber. The Dark Angel comes with an RGB configuration, which is excellent for smashing around and sparring. This blade, along with every blade right now on Ownership.com, is 40% off and includes free shipping. If you guys want an additional $15 off, you can also use my promo code EWOK, that's all caps. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. Mace Windu was known for his special ability to detect what were known as shatter points. These were fractures in the Force, kind of like weaknesses in a fortification that could be exploited and could cause a significant amount of damage. A shatter point could be a weak spot in a Sith Lord's lightsaber defense, or in the case of the Empire's Death Star, a small ventilation shaft. Now, of course, the plan to take out the Death Star included a lot of different people, and a lot of these guys all gave their lives. Like the entire Rogue One team, Cassian Andor, Jyn Erso, Bodhi Rook, Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus, K2SO, and many other rebels who supported their attack, like Antog Merrick, Ruskat Melshi, and so many others. But none of this would have happened if it weren't for the scientist Galen Erso. Erso, ironically, was also responsible for creating the technology that could turn kyber crystals into a deadly weapon. But at great personal risk, he would build a flaw into the Death Star's reactor system, and at the same time, he would pass that important information onto the Rebel Alliance. Without it, Luke Skywalker and company would have an incredibly difficult time destroying the Death Star and surviving the Battle of Yavin. And in many ways, the Battle of Yavin is what kicked off the Galactic Civil War in the first place. In the Bad Batch series, shortly after Order 66 is carried out, there is a huge assembly where Chancellor Palpatine announces the rise of the New Order. The cheers we hear from the regs are deafening.
For a safe and secure society.
Still don't think the regs are programmed?
It's not just about the programming. The clone soldiers were technically supposed to protect the Republic and the institutions that guarded the Republic. But at the end of the day, the clones were not citizen soldiers. They were more like slave soldiers. They didn't actually take part in the voting process at all. And so their loyalty was first to each other and second to the authority and chain of command. And Palpatine, well, he was already the commander-in-chief of the Grand Army of the Republic, so who cares if he just changes the name of the government from Republic to Empire? Or so most clones thought. The clones that ended up defecting were either severely bothered by the actions of Order 66, where they lost their own autonomy and also were forced to kill commanders they might have had close connections to. Other clones just disliked the Empire's new culture and how they treated the clones. These clones were really amongst the minority, and they would be the first individuals to really defect from the Empire, and unfortunately for them, there was very little infrastructure there to tell them what to do and keep them safe. Thankfully, Captain Rex, as he did during the Clone Wars, paved the way ahead for the rest of the clones. He had defected literally after Order 66 and would devote the next few years of his life building an underground resistance that protected clone defectors from the Empire. In Legends, many clones were saved by a Mandalorian mercenary named Cal Skirata. He had adopted the unit of clone commandos he had trained on Kamino and would use all of his resources and connections to save as many clones who, wanted out of the Empire. In many ways, Captain Rex fills in that hole in the new Disney canon with his resistance movement. Captain Rex and his clones could also provide the rebellion with a lot of information about how the Imperial military operates.
Stand by for code check.
Cody and I practically invented these emergency protocols back in the Clone War. Trust me, the codes are good.
When the Empire rose out of the Republic, most people didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't just the clones. To most, the Clone Wars ending was the most important issue. If they had to trade away some of their personal freedoms, then so be it. Perhaps most eager to fall in line was the business community. I mean, investments and revenues are hard to make if there's no stability, and the Empire, well, they promised a lot of stability. Now, something that the business community didn't like was Palpatine nationalizing several companies and adding it to the growing Imperial military-industrial complex. One of those companies was Incom Corporation. They had made a name for themselves by first releasing the Z-95 Headhunter in the years leading up to the Clone Wars. It was a widely popular platform, and it would be followed up by the ARC-170 starfighter built by Incom for the Clone Wars. When the Empire tried to nationalize Incom Corporation, a good percentage of the design team and engineering staff all defected to the rebellion, and they made sure to get their new, highly advanced prototype designs to the rebels. That fighter would turn out to be the T-65B X-Wing, the starship that might have won the war, or at least destroyed the largest number of enemy TIE fighters and 2 Death Stars as well. Speaking of Incom, they also provided U-Wings to the rebellion that were accidentally lost while en route to the Imperial Navy. This all happened thanks to Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan. He would alter Senate records in order to hide this transfer of ships. Bail Organa wasn't just an important Imperial defector, he was probably amongst the first defectors, and he was also the architect of what would eventually become the Alliance to Restore the Republic. Using his diplomatic immunity and resources as cover, Bail Organa would spend the rest of his life fighting the Empire and setting up a logistics and communications network that would become the skeleton and backbone of the early rebellion. He even trained Princess Leia to become an operator like him. And it's thanks to her that the rebellion on Lothal would receive 3 Hammerhead Corvettes, originally destined to be aid vehicles. Leia just let the Corvettes get stolen by the local resistance movement. One of those Corvettes, the Lightmaker, would end up ramming 2 Star Destroyers into each other during the Battle of Scarif. That debris would go crashing down through the Shield Gate and allow the rebels to get the Death Star plans off the planet. Bail Organa was also a close friend and ally to the Jedi. Without his help on Coruscant, it's likely that Grandmaster Yoda would have never made it off the planet. Bail Organa would eventually step down from the Imperial Senate, and Princess Leia would take his place. Now, a lot of people on this list seem to be providing strategic or even tactical assets that could help the rebellion. What Princess Leia brought to the table was very different. She had this amazing sense of grace and sex appeal that was all wrapped up in the cloth of royalty. You see, at the time, Emperor Palpatine didn't have complete dominance over the entire galaxy. There were still other power centers out there. If Coruscant was the nerve center of the galaxy, then Alderaan, with its white-capped mountains and luscious green valleys, was the heart of the galaxy. Alderaan was seen as an enlightened world, one of the oldest in the Republic. Alderaanians were gifted in literature, philosophy, and the arts, and they also were known for having really good wine and having a very robust outreach program that supported refugees all across the galaxy. In many ways, Alderaan's compassion and focus on beauty balanced out Coruscant's vibrant but at times ruthless market economy. And so Alderaan had real support out in the wider galaxy amongst the civilian populace, which is why Emperor Palpatine couldn't just completely get rid of the Alderaanians. And the public really liked Princess Leia. When it was announced that she and her father were supporters of the rebellion, it was a great shock and confusion to all of those Organa fans out there. And when the Empire labeled the Organas as essentially terrorists, it made a lot of these Imperials begin to question what the Empire was talking about. Such was the reputation built by the Alderaanian royal family. Princess Leia would also partake in many daring raids and battles herself. While she wasn't a part of the high command because of her age and inexperience, she proved to be a very competent commander, and perhaps equally as important, the sight of her in a metal bikini was effectively used by rebel intelligence as a PSYOPs recruitment tool. Many of the early rebels came from the fringe. You had groups like Enfys Nest or Saw's partisans. Even Luthen Rael, the spy master, was quite a dodgy individual. When rebellions are made of only the fringes, they rarely succeed. This just means that whatever idea they're trying to champion has not reached mass appeal. Mon Mothma was quite different from the early rebels. She represented compromise and the middle. As a matter of fact, I would call Mon Mothma an institutionalist. She believed in the bureaucratic systems that governed the Republic and still existed within the Empire. She viewed open acts of rebellion as very dangerous and potentially costly.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
People will suffer.
Mon Mothma would attempt to stay within the Imperial Senate and use the proper channels to express her concerns about Palpatine's growing power, while everyone else had already left the room. Now, before I see people write women with the coffee emoji, do you realize how ballsy it is to remain as one of the only senators in the entire Imperial Senate who is openly opposed to the policies of an authoritarian who could easily have her head removed? Remember, Mon Mothma did not enjoy the same type of political clout and protection that the Alderaanian royal family did. She came from Chandrilla, which was an unremarkable agricultural world. On top of that, Mon Mothma was secretly using her cover as a senator to raise funds for a rebellion, just like Bail Organa. When Mon Mothma became the leader of the rebellion, she was exactly what this organization needed. A level-headed and cautious individual who was focused on the grand strategy of the war and the battle for the hearts and minds of the Republic. She wasn't a military commander and she knew this, and so she properly delegated those tasks to the people who were, equipped to handle them. This means that from day one, the Alliance to Restore the Republic wasn't just some insurgency military force like the Partisans. It effectively was a functioning government with a head of state, and its long-term goals weren't just, destroying Imperial installations. They wanted something more. Mon Mothma and her values represented a legitimate alternative to Palpatine's cruel dictatorship. So Mon Mothma didn't really need to lead the Rebel Alliance into battle. She had individuals like Jan Dodonna for that. He was a Clone Wars veteran on the Republic's side and an Imperial captain of a Star Destroyer for a short while after. To have risen as high as he did within the Republic and Imperial Navy meant that Jan Dodonna knew the ins and outs of how the organization was run and what military capabilities the Empire had. This meant that Jan Dodonna was perfectly situated to create a military force that could counter the Imperial Navy. And that's exactly what Jan Dodonna did. He took a look at the rebellion's existing fleet of diplomatic vessels and smuggling ships and would develop the Rebel Alliance's naval doctrine with a focus on smaller, quicker ships that could rapidly deploy and retreat when necessary. This is the strategy that would keep the Rebel Alliance alive and going battle after battle. Jan also brought a sense of professionalism and discipline that this group of scruffy nerf herders desperately needed to survive those rough first few years. Dodonna wasn't the best tactician or best military leader, but he knew how to get the job done. In the beginning of Rogue One, Cassian Andor shoots his informant in the back instead of letting him fall into Imperial hands. This was a tough and immoral decision, unless, you were able to look at the wider picture, of course. Andor was on a mission to gather knowledge about an Imperial defector. This plot would eventually lead to the Death Star plans that would allow the rebels to win at Yavin and effectively change the course of the war. Cassian's murder of this informant might have seemed wrong or unnecessary, but the rebels were fighting an uphill battle against a much more superior enemy. David Dravins, a former Republic military intelligence officer, would defect from the Empire pretty early on during the war. And just like how Jan Dodonna brought a sense of professionalism to the Imperial Navy, Dravin brought a cold and calculating culture to the Rebel intelligence, allowing it to be more effective and heartless when necessary. A lot of people would call Dravins a coward for being so cruel, yet never serving on the front himself. That was until the assault on the Mako Ta space docks. Dravin, who had developed a special anti-Vader drill, stayed behind to confront Darth Vader in order to buy Princess Leia some time. His drill would fail, and he would die as a hero. The Rebel army didn't really see heavy combat until the mid-rim offensive. Prior to that, most Rebel ground engagements used special forces. You have units like the Pathfinders, who would help Rogue One steal the Death Star plans, or other small commando units. And in the middle of all that, you had Crix Medine, who essentially created the Empire's commando force. He would, of course, later on defect to the rebellion and bring all of that knowledge to the Alliance, which was a huge thing. It's thanks to him that Rebel commando units would be amongst the most efficient tools used by the Rebel Alliance in the remainder of the war. Our last spot was either going to go to Wedge Antilles or Han Solo. Wedge Antilles basically destroyed the second Death Star, and he also trained countless starfighter pilots for the Rebels. But the problem with Wedge Antilles was he always refused promotions, and this was so that he can stay inside of his cockpit and continue flying sorties. But because of that, he has a limited effect on the wider rebellion. Han Solo also took part in the destruction of a Death Star. One could argue that without him intervening during the Battle of Yavin, Luke would have died before he got his proton torpedo off. More importantly, Han Solo was well connected with the criminal underground, and he was also liked by the smuggler community. In the early days of the war, the rebellion had to source materials from wherever they could get them. Han Solo also embraced his officer commission. He would lead rebel ground forces to a fantastic victory on the moon of Endor. Later on, Han Solo would use all of his connections to aid his friend Chewbacca in the liberation of Kashyyyk. So there you have it, guys, 10 different individuals who had a huge role in helping the Rebel Alliance win the Galactic Civil War. Let me know in the comment section below which one's your favorite, and also don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.